This is often the case on a 12-game slate, but I feel like especially for today, the stacking options are really good. There are no options discussed in the show today where I feel like it's I guess if I have to. And the I guess if I have to stack is pretty common for shorter slates and stuff like that. But for tonight, we're definitely not getting those. These are legitimate stacks that I feel good about and ones that I am excited to use for tonight. We're going to break down what those stacks are, top pitching options, and more to get you ready for Friday night in MLB DFS. Welcome on into the solo shot. That's right here on the FanDuel Podcast Network and numberFire.com. My name is Jim Sonis. I am a senior writer and analyst for numberFire, here to break down Friday's 12-game main slate. We're locked set for 7:05 p.m. Eastern for tonight. Couple weather notes for this slate. The first one is that there is a chance of thunderstorms in Atlanta for the Braves and the Marlins. They appear to be isolated, so should be good to go there, but check back on that later. Finally, very high temperatures in Kansas City and St. Louis for tonight. That is 93 degrees, the Royals and the Dodgers in Kansas City, and 91 degrees in St. Louis for the Cardinals and the Yankees. There is some chance of thunderstorms in St. Louis, but if they play, I jack up offenses for the Yankees, Cardinals, Royals, and Dodgers, and those teams will be focuses for us in the stacking section later on, not just because of the weather, but it definitely does not hurt. So check back on the timing of storms for St. Louis and Atlanta, but jack up offenses in Kansas City and St. Louis. We'll dive on into this slate, talk some pitching, talk some stacks later on in just 1 second. But first, a reminder to make sure you're subscribed to the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed wherever you get your podcasts. We are on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, etc., etc. If you like what you hear, leave us a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. And of course, today's show also over on the FanDuel YouTube page and FanDuel TV Plus. As for next week, I am out for the entire week. I am moving to Chicago, so will not be working at all next week, but Tom Vecchia will be here to cover the solo shot for me, Austin Swaim covering the spread. There will be no show Tuesday because that is July 4th, but they'll be with you Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, keeping this operation running. There will be no shows on the FanDuel YouTube page or FanDuel TV Plus, so just on the podcast feeds. If you want these shows next week and you typically watch on YouTube or FanDuel TV Plus, make sure you subscribe to the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed and the Covering the Spread podcast feed, wherever you get your podcasts. Baseball season is in full swing, and there's no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now, new customers get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's up to $1,000 back in bonus bets if your first bet doesn't win. So don't miss your chance to snag a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 when you join FanDuel today. FanDuel, official partner of Major League Baseball. Major League Baseball trademarks used with permission must be 21 plus and present in select states. First online real money wager only. $10 deposit required. Refund issued as non-withdrawable bonus bets that expire 7 days after receipt. Restrictions apply. See full terms at FanDuel.com/sportsbook. FanDuel is offering online sports wagering in Kansas under an agreement with Kansas Star Casino LLC. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit FanDuel.com/RG in Arizona. 1-800-NEXT-STEP or text NEXT-STEP to 53342. In Connecticut, 1-888-789-7777. Or visit ccpg.org/chat. In Indiana, 1-800-9-WITH-IT. In Wyoming and Kansas, 1-800-522-4700. Or in Kansas, ksgamblinghelp.com. Louisiana is 1-877-770-STOP. In Massachusetts, gamblinghelplinema.org. Or call 800-327-5050 for 24/7 support. In Massachusetts or in Maryland, mdgamblinghelp.org. In New York, 1-877-8-HOPE-NY, text HOPE-NY. And in West Virginia, go to 1-800-GAMBLER.net. Pitching preview for this Friday main slate. Shane McClanahan comes in with a high salary of $11,000, followed by James Paxton at 10-1, John Gray 10,000 flat, followed by Bobby Miller at 98. Jose Barrios is 97, with Pablo Lopez at 95. Griffin Canning is 93, with Alex Cobb also at 93 off the IL. Freddie Peralta 92, Bryce Miller 91, with Dean Kramer and Michael Lorenzen as the others at $8,000 or higher. Now, on most slates, I do want to spend up a pitcher in MLB DFS because that gets you more upside and stuff like that. On this slate, though, the top two guys are Shane McClanahan and James Paxton, both of whom are on the road and coming off of injuries. Back injury for McClanahan, knee injury for Paxton. And I want to stack the Dodgers later on, who have high salaries. So I actually feel okay spending down at pitcher for tonight and making my top play a value play. That guy is Dean Kramer, whose salary is $8,700 against the Twins. I like Kramer quite a bit. Overall, Kramer has not been great this year. He has a 4.50 ERA with a 4.33 skill interactive ERA, and that's not something you want to feel super good about. But we did see Kramer make a tweak 7 starts ago. And in that start, he basically ditched his slider entirely, instead leaning more on his cutter. Now, that's a sweeper over at Baseball Savant, the slider is, and he had decent numbers on that, according to Baseball Savant, but the cutter is a pitch he can throw to both righties and lefties. It's a more dynamic pitch. This has been a pretty good shift for Kramer because in those 7 starts, he has a 3.91 skill interactive ERA. He has a 24% strikeout rate, which for this slate isn't too bad. He has not had more than 7 strikeouts yet, but he's had at least 5 in each. So maybe there is upside for more if we get those strikeouts super concentrated. And some of those matchups were tough. He's facing the Twins at home, and the Twins give a big boost to righties. 28% strikeout rate against righties on the current active roster. That's the highest number on the slate by a decent margin. I think that allows us to use Kramer at $8,700. If we had more firm studs, if Paxton were healthy or McClanahan were healthy, maybe we'd go at them. But I think on this specific slate, with the way things break down, Kramer actually is a guy who makes a lot of sense. So Dean Kramer, not typically a stud we turn to in DFS, but for tonight, specifically on this slate, I do like him in the salary savings he brings at $8,700. The number 2 slot is a more traditional stud. That's John Gray, who has had some hiccups recently, and he's facing the Astros, but I do like him despite that. The hiccups, to me, on Gray are the bigger concern. He had a short outing against the Blue Jays, and in that game, the velocity was down. But then last time out, Gray lasted just 5 innings against the Yankees. So back-to-back starts with some sort of red flag. But in the Yankees game, the velocity for Gray was back up. And it's not like he got knocked around. He just didn't get many strikeouts or many whiffs. So that's why he's not first on this list, the concern that I have from those past 2 starts. But again, the velo was fine against the Yankees. He was still throwing his slider, and sometimes if guys are banged up, you might see them cut back on breaking pitches, but the slider usage there for Gray was still very good. Even including those 2 down starts, we've got 8 starts with Gray using his slider more often once again, and in that time, he has a 3.64 skill interactive ERA with a 27% strikeout rate and just a 35% hard hit rate allowed. He is a very good pitcher as long as we can believe that he's healthy and still clicking along as well as he was before this year. I think I've seen enough here to believe that he is, so I am going to use Gray with his salary at $10,000. I think there are enough red flags to push him below Kramer for me, but it's not enough for me to cross Gray off entirely. So to me, the top 2 pitchers are Dean Kramer and John Gray. I feel a bit of uncertainty with both of them for one reason or another, but you're not going to find a rock, sock, and loaded, if that's actually a phrase, starter on tonight's slate. So I do feel good enough about Gray to use him here at $10,000. The third slot is between Pablo Lopez and Griffin Canning. Both these guys have tough matchups. Lopez facing the Orioles on the road. Canning gets Arizona at home. I'm going to go Canning for the reasons we'll discuss, but Lopez is in play for tournaments for sure. Part of the reason I like Canning is the status of Corbin Carroll. He left yesterday's game with a shoulder issue, and now he's day-to-day. There's a chance he does not play here, and that would make Arizona not a bad offense, but not as good as they've been with their 113 WRC plus in the current active roster against righties. That's not all Corbin Carroll, so they'll still be tough, but not as tough. And Canning is pitching really well right now. His velocity has stabilized now over his past 8 starts. And in that time, Canning has a 3.75 skill interactive ERA with a 24% strikeout rate and a 5% walk rate. The big issue he's had is hard contact. He's had some bad starts as a result of that, but still has a 3.40 ERA overall in this time. And that's even with 5 of the 8 starts coming on the road. I do have Lopez projected for more strikeouts tonight than Canning, but I feel more firm in Canning for whatever reason. So I would say it's kind of a coin toss. I'd probably keep exposure between the 2 pretty even, but I would keep it lower than what I want for Gray and Kramer. So focus more so on Kramer and Gray, but I do think that Canning and Lopez both viable options for tonight for that third slot. So to me, Kramer's the top guy, followed by Gray, and then coin toss between Canning and Lopez for the third slot. Let's talk now about these really fun stacks. And typically the Tigers, not a team, will have in this section, especially not if we're enthusiastic about the stacks for tonight. But they're at Coors, facing Austin Gomber, and I think we can actually get pretty excited about them here, especially given their salaries are still very low. It does help a lot that Gomber is a lefty. The Tigers have a 99 at WRC plus against lefties, and their ISO goes up to 173 with a lot of fly balls. So they are much more palatable as an offense against lefties than against righties. And Gomber is still struggling. Most recently, he's been throwing more sliders his past 5 starts, and the strikeouts have gone up a bit. But his hard hit rate in that time is 49%. It's led to continued poor results. So I don't think that shift is going to be the skeleton key for Austin Gomber. Overall this year, he has a 7.01 ERA with a 6.86 expected ERA. And at Coors Field, he has struggled against some pretty poor offenses. And I don't think the Tigers count as a poor offense against lefties. So they're not our favorite offense by any means, but I do want to be on them for tonight. Again, it does help that the salaries for them did go up, but the baseline was so low, they're still pretty low, even at Coors Field. Within this offense, they've been hitting Andy Ibanez pretty high in the order recently. Ibanez is 30, so I'm not expecting some like massive surge out of him, but he did hit for power in AAA, and his barrel rate in the majors is pretty good. Salary here is $2,800. I've used Ibanez as a one-off a couple times recently, even in like not as elite matchups. So getting him below 3,000 at Coors Field, pretty tough to turn down. In general, we can feel good about the righties here. So I think the Tigers deserve to be our top stack, and Ibanez very much in that mix. I have a similar sentiment about the Tigers as I do to the New York Yankees. The Yankees are an offense that stinks against righties without Aaron Judge. But against lefties, their WRC plus in the active roster goes up to 111, and their ISO is 211. I think that allows us to stack them here against Matthew Liberatore. I actually did like Liberatore a lot when he first came back up. I used him in his first start back from AAA. He looked great down there. First start was awesome. But over his past 4 starts, the velocity has stabilized back out for Liberatore, and it's stabilized at a lower level than what it was before. So the velo's been down. In those 4 starts, he has a 5.51 skill interactive ERA, 15% strikeout rate, and 45% hard hit rate. The results have fallen behind too, and part of that is tough matchups. But again, the Yankees are a tough matchup when it's a lefty, and it's crazy hot as far as the weather for tonight in St. Louis. So I think we can stack them here with an okay amount of confidence, even though things have been rough for the Yankees so far. I still think they're a good play for tonight, specifically facing off against Liberatore in very good hitting weather. Giancarlo Stanton definitely having a bad year. His OBP is 260, but the hard contact is still there. 15.9% barrel rate, a 43.7% hard hit rate, and those numbers haven't been as good since he came back off the IL. So I don't think we have to go bananas here with Stanton, but his salary also below $3,000. I'm very open to it. I think I've seen enough from him to still feel okay about him now that we're getting a salary discount. And there are a lot of guys here you can feel good about in the Yankees. Harrison Bader's been hitting the ball pretty well. I mean, Gleyber Torres, Josh Donaldson has actually been okay against lefties. Proceed with caution there, obviously, but I do think the Yankees are a fine play for today, despite their overall struggles. The third stack will be where we can spend all that salary flexibility. That's in the Dodgers. We do see teams have a bit of a lull after leaving elevation at Coors Field, and that could happen here with them because they were just there. But again, crazy hot in Kansas City, and the matchup is good, so I feel like we want to go back to the Dodgers here again. They're facing Alec Marsh, making his big league debut, and Marsh has had some flashes in the minors, got a ton of whiffs both in AAA and AA, and he got some ground balls as well. But he walked a lot of guys, and that could be an issue against a very veteran offense that has a 10% walk rate against righties. And Marsh was not overly restrictive with hard contact. In AAA, his hard hit rate allowed was 39%. His ERA in AA was 5.32, so may have struggled with hard contact there as well. We don't have the data to prove whether that's true. Now, Marsh is facing the Dodgers in warm temperatures, good for hitting. He could wind up doing well, but I mean, they've got no big league tape on him yet, so maybe that helps. But I do think that the best way to play things here is to stack the Dodgers and make Marsh prove it before we avoid stacking against him. Typically, I'll try to find like a value play or some like trendy guy to discuss in the like hitting section of the stack. But I also just want to take a second here to marvel at JD Martinez, the heater he's on right now. He had 3 home runs in 3 games at Coors Field. His ISO overall this year is now 319, and it's 342 against righties specifically. So when we're talking about the Dodgers against a righty, I'm going to prefer Mookie Betts still because he's more likely to run. But I think Martinez has pushed himself up into the 2 slot as far as prioritizing guys for stacking against righties. So above Freddie Freeman, above Will Smith, above Max Muncy, I think it's Mookie 1, Martinez 2, and then those guys from there. So good problem to have where we're pushing down good batters because we have someone so good and hitting the ball so well this year. And it's fun to have JD Martinez back to kind of his old ways once again. Let's go now to things to watch. Didn't want to talk about Shane McClanahan briefly. He's facing the Mariners, and that's a super high strikeout matchup. But coming off a start where he left early due to a back injury, and his strikeout rate wasn't super high heading into that start either. So I'm going to avoid McClanahan tonight personally, but it also could be a spot where that looks stupid just because he could be healthy, could go overlooked as a result of that, as a result of his salary. So I won't be going here personally, but if you're drawn there, go ahead because it's a really good matchup for strikeouts for McClanahan against the Mariners. Going back to the Yankees-Cardinals game, I do like the other side of that game as well. That's the Cardinals against Luis Severino. Severino has struggled this year, but he did seem to regain a bit of form last time out, and that's why I had the Dodgers above the Yankees or the Cardinals for stacking for today. But very receptive to them. Maybe that start could have been a fluke. I respect Severino long-term as far as a pitcher goes, but wouldn't mind going at the Cardinals within that same game as well. Finally, the Rockies are facing Michael Lorenzen, which is not a terrible spot. Lorenzen has had good results this year, but that's partly due to a lot of plus matchups in the AL Central. Now, this is a plus matchup too, but it's at Coors Field. That's a different scenario. I think we can stack the Rockies here. There's definitely a scenario where they win this game. I actually bet their money line for tonight. So if they win it, that means they score more runs than the Tigers, which would make them probably the better stack. So very much within the range of outcomes that the Rockies are the better stack at Coors Field, and I do want to put them in my player pool as a result. Let's finish up here with the dinger calls for today. I don't typically go with 2 guys in the same team because it's kind of boring, but I wanted a fun one to put my money where my mouth is and have a fun or a boring one to put my money where my mouth is and a fun one, and that happened to be on the same team. So the boring one is Giancarlo Stanton. I feel like we need to buy into the batted ball data and kind of, put myself out there a little bit for him. It is a low salary, so it's not a boring one from that perspective, but it is Giancarlo Stanton. Really good weather for hitting, so we'll go Stanton as the boring home run call for today. For the fun one, Anthony Volpe puts the ball in the air a lot against lefties, has hit for power so far this year. I think that's a pretty fun combination and probably don't view him really as being a guy with a lot of power, batting lower in the order now. So maybe there's a downside there, but I do think the power is fun. So we'll go with the Giancarlo Stanton, Anthony Volpe, despite the fact that Volpe will probably bat lower in the order for tonight. That's what we got for today here on the Solo Shot. But as mentioned, next week, we still have the shows here, despite the fact I'll be gone, as Austin Swayman and Tom Vecchio filling the seat. Tom here on the Solo Shot, Austin over on Covering the Spread. So big thank you to both those guys in advance. Follow Tom on Twitter at DFS_Tom and follow Austin at ASwain3. If you got any questions for me, I'll be kind of MIA for the next week or in week and a half or so, back the Monday of the All-Star break, but feel free to reach out if you have questions. I'm on Twitter at Jim Sannes, JIMSANNES. Want to thank you all for tuning in for today. Good luck to you with your MLB DFS lineups, not just tonight, but also across the next week. And we'll talk to you once again here on the Solo Shot after the All-Star break. This has been the Solo Shot right here on the FanDuel Podcast Network.